Good evening, Upper West Siders. I'm Councilmember Helen Rosenthal. Thank you for joining our town hall to hear directly from the Department of Education about their plan for opening schools. I'm thrilled that the DOE executives are here with us tonight, and we'll introduce them in just a moment. After the DOE gives a short presentation, I will pose your questions that you have either sent into our office already or that you'll post in the chat box below. Our hope is to provide information and transparency about the difficult process of reopening our schools in what the next school year will look like. The COVID-19 pandemic will be with us for the foreseeable future. The safety and well-being of our students, families, and school staff must be our top priority. My office is here to support you, and we will email highlights from tonight's event to everyone on our e-blast list. So if you don't receive our emails, you can sign up at helenrosenthal.com. We are honored to be joined by 4 panelists this evening. Adrienne Austin is DOE Acting Deputy Chancellor for Community Empowerment, Partnerships, and Communications. She leads the DOE's work to empower families and communities while also increasing the public's understanding of key educational policies. Her commitment is to families. She too is a parent of a child in our school system. So making sure that parents' voices are heard, respected, and incorporated in their child's education is paramount for her. Marisol Rosales is Executive Superintendent for the Borough of Manhattan. She oversees all the district superintendents and the majority of the staff for Manhattan and brings a wealth of experience as a former teacher, principal, and Borough High School superintendent. Nadia Chada is Senior Director of Strategic Affairs for Office of Student Enrollment. She helps to support the development of equitable enrollment policies with a focus on strengthening relationships with our communities. This has been an important issue for me and our district, and I look forward to what she has to say tonight. Finally, we are delighted to be joined by our own School District 3 Superintendent, Christine Laughlin. I know parents are reassured to see a familiar face during this anxious time, and I greatly appreciate her being here. She, like all of our school administrators and teachers, has gone above and beyond during this crisis. So if you have a question for our panel, please click on the chat function on the bottom of your screen and type in your question. We will be watching the chat closely and will ask as many of your questions as possible. If you're listening by phone or your question doesn't get answered, you can submit questions during the event, but please email them to helen@helenrosenthal.com, and we will get back to you, and likely your question will be answered in our follow-up email. And now I'm delighted to introduce Deputy Chancellor Austin and her team, who will be responding to your questions.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rosenthal. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for hosting this town hall. I'm really glad to be here speaking with families tonight. Thank you to my DOE colleagues in District 3, our principals, teachers, guidance counselors, school food workers, custodians, parent coordinators, nurses. I just really want to shout out our DOE school staff because they did an incredible job of supporting our students and families through this crisis and are continuing to do so during the summer. Many of them are working and will do so in the fall, so thank you. I also want to thank our Manhattan Executive Superintendent, Executive Superintendent Rosales, and Superintendent Laughlin for their hard work supporting our Manhattan school communities. And last, but certainly not least, I want to thank our families. I know members of our Community Education Council 3 are here. Thank you for your service to our community, and shout out to all of our parent leaders who are here tonight. And thank you to our parents just all across Manhattan who are here with us tonight, because it is an incredible, difficult process doing remote learning. And I know because I've done it with my two children, and I want to thank you for your patience with us and the grace that you've extended us throughout this crisis. Yesterday, the mayor and chancellor announced that our schools are going to be implementing blended learning in the fall, and they presented program models that the schools will be selecting from for next year. So I'm going to start by talking us through those program models before we get to Q&A. I want to preface that by saying that we are faced with really difficult choices, but we must be prepared for them. We've incorporated parent and student feedback into these models. We had a family and student survey that went out on reopening, and we heard from over 450,000 parents and over 100,000 students, and roughly 50% preferred alternating days. So we've set a floor, but not a ceiling, and we expect that schools are going to be able to serve at least a third of students at any given time, and many will be able to do more. We're going to be working with our city, with city agencies, with business leaders on childcare options. We know that we have a lot of working parents in the city, and we're going to work on finding support for our working families. And so with that, if we can go to the slides to just review the program models. Thank you. So this is just an overview of the key tenets of the plan. Families are going to be able to opt out and opt in to in-person instruction and choose remote learning full-time. There are going to be defined periods of time where parents can opt in and opt out. Obviously, principals have to have some stability in terms of programming. So after a particular window of time, parents are not going to be able to opt back into in-person learning. But there will be defined periods, and that calendar of time is going to be explained. So going to the next slide, I think we can sort of go to the slide that goes through these models. Model 1, and if you look, there's model 1A and 1B, assumes a minimum of 50% of students attending. So students are going to receive in-person instruction for the same 2 days every week and every other Monday. There are 3 groups in total, and one of those groups you'll see is Group D. That's an all remote group. So that's for the parents that opt into all remote learning. Model 2 assumes 33% of students are going to be present in schools for in-person instruction. 1 day will be the same each week, with rotating Mondays and Tuesdays on a 3-week cycle. For an example, one cohort consistently comes in Wednesday, one Thursday, one Friday, and then rotation, Monday and Tuesday amongst the 3 cohorts. So if you look, and we can just take a little bit of time. I know I'm a visual learner, and so these charts were really, really helpful for me in understanding that. So if we can just take a couple of seconds so people can just process what that actually looks like. And this is another option for principals. The first, Model 1, was for elementary, middle, and high school. And again, Model 2 is for elementary, middle, and high schools. Okay, we can go to Model 3. So Model 3 assumes that 33% of students will be able to participate in in-person learning. This is only for middle and high schools. So this is a 6-day rotation. So in-person once every 4 days, or in-person 2 days out of 6. High schools are used to this kind of planning already, which is why this model was selected. For example, one cohort comes in Mondays and Tuesdays 1 week, then 2 more cycles of 2 days, so that the same cohort coming again the following Tuesday and Wednesday. That's going to repeat over a course of weeks on 6-day cycles. And we can go to the next slide. And models 4 and 5 are for our District 75 schools only. And this particular model, both 4A and 4B, students may have some students in schools may have some students in school every other week or full time. So it reflects the unique needs and challenges of this particular student body. So if you all want to see that, it's Group D again, which is the remote instruction group that parents can opt into. And then for Model 4A, it is one group, Group A, going for an entire Monday through Friday consecutive school schedule for 1 week, and then The second week, that group would be off and group B would be on for Monday through Friday, consecutive instruction in person, and then rotating. And then if you look at model 4B, it assumes that there's a group C, which would be attending school every week consecutively Monday through Friday, within that group A and B rotating weeks. So with that, this information is on our website. If you go to our website, there's a lot more information, and I certainly invite you to do that, www.schools.nyc.gov. There's a lot of information there. This is dense. We're sort of doing a quick review. Many of you hopefully have already seen this. This is what was released yesterday. I know many of you want to understand more about Manhattan and want to hear about how planning will look locally. I am honored and privileged to be joined tonight by my colleague, Executive Superintendent Marisol Rosales, who actually has information about how families in Manhattan responded to the survey on reopening. So I'm going to ask that she share some of that data and planning with you all now.
Thank you, Deputy Chancellor Austin. I would love to, and I think before I do that, I just want to share a couple of things. First, something that has resonated with me throughout this pandemic is connectedness, communications, hope, and safety. And so I just want to thank our council member Rosenthal for creating this forum to do exactly that. It's been an unprecedented and beyond challenging school year. And so I want to begin by saying thank you to our amazing teachers and principals for their creativity, flexibility. I want to say thank you to our families for your partnership and your patience and your flexibility as well. And especially, we have a superintendent in District 3 who just finished her first year, and what a year I gave her. And so I do want you to please give our superintendent, Christine Laughlin, a big virtual round of applause. She's done an incredible job. And so in times of uncertainty, loss, and fear, we continue to show up as New Yorkers, right? We continue to be inclusive and supportive. And so I'm really grateful for that. And with that said, I do want to share with you our family survey results, fresh, hot from the oven, as they were shared with our superintendents and executive superintendents across the city today. So I do want to say that for us in Manhattan, 34% of families and 23% of students responded to this survey. 37% of our families are anticipating needing childcare during the week when their child in any grade is not attending school in person. 16% of our families are not sure yet. Nearly all family and students that responded identify the importance of having cleaning supplies, such as hand sanitizer that needs to be available to all students. When families were asked how comfortable their child would be wearing a mask to school, the level of comfort varied by grade level. 43% of families with a student in pre-K to second grade reported being very or mostly comfortable, compared to 51% for grades 3 to 8 and 62% for grades 9 through 12. 65 to 70% of students in grades 6 through 12 versus 48% of citywide reported that they were very or mostly comfortable wearing a mask to school every day. 60% of our families versus 53% citywide reported feeling very or mostly comfortable sending their child to a school building every day this fall, if recommended health and safety measures such as social distancing are in place, of course. 59% of students versus 56% citywide reported feeling very or mostly comfortable going to a school building every day this fall. Among options for reopenings, 56% of families versus 53% citywide identified alternating schools days as their most preferred option compared to learning at home every day, which was 21%, or alternating weeks, which was 22%, which is one of the reasons you're seeing these models. 52% of students identify alternating days as their most preferred option versus 48% citywide. Most families, 84%, and students, 80%, identified instruction in core content areas, and by that I mean math, science, social studies, and ELA as the most important experience to prioritize for in-person learning more than any other classes such as physical education, arts, or electives. 58% for families and 75% for students. When asked about what supports would be most helpful for learning at home, 70% of families and 60% of students were most likely to identify having a variety of ways to learn from home, such as paper packets, live teaching, one-on-one tutoring, etc. For live instruction specifically, 69% of families and 36% of students chose this for one of the most helpful while learning at home. And finally, 93% of families and 90% of students responded that they have access to a computer or device to complete schoolwork, while 96% of families and 93% of students said they have access to internet and Wi-Fi. And I wanted to share this information with everyone, A, because it pertains to Manhattan, and B, because it actually shows the connection to the models that Deputy Chancellor Austin is sharing with us.
Are you all ready for us to jump in with questions? I have to say they're coming fast and furious. I already see like 50. So we're not going to be able to get to all of them tonight, but we'll do the best we can. And I'm trying to group them, you know, but I see one question coming across over and over in different forms. But basically, if you could explain again this notion of each school is likely to have a different schedule because the schedules, option A, option B, or the model is going to be decided by the principal. And the principal, I hope I'm saying this right, but that the principal is going to make that decision based on the feedback that the principal gets from parents saying what model they would prefer, and from teachers and administrators saying what models they would prefer, and then the principal's own school layout. So there's going to be a date in August by which families will have to say, choose an option that they prefer. Maybe they'll do a ranked choice or something. Principals will pull together all that information and make the best choice for their school. Is that a summary? And I think it answers a lot of questions on here.
That's an excellent summary. You basically stated what the issues are. Look, principals have really difficult jobs in a normal school year when it comes to fall planning. And certainly there are a lot of open questions that principals will work to support principals to resolve within the next couple of weeks. But ultimately, we do have a governance structure that's helpful. It's the school leadership team on the school level. The school leadership team has stakeholders that include our teachers, the other school staff, parents, and that's going to really be the consulting group that works with the principal to identify which model is going to work, looking at the data, looking at staffing, looking at the school capacity with social distancing. And we are actually going to have a toolkit released and issued to schools next week that help principals think through how to engage families, because we know that this is something that just as a system, we can use as much support as possible in doing. And it's going to be incredibly important because we know that this is complex. We want our parents to know what's happening and be in the loop and feel like they have some agency in the decisions that are happening, because they are going to have an impact, a very big impact on families. So as much parent engagement as our schools can do, we're going to suggest, and that's going to be a part of a toolkit that we provide principals with next week. I don't know if you want to chime in there, Marisol, and add anything.
Yeah, I think you said it, right? So principals will have to look into the physical space, right? The space that they have available to them. They'll have to factor in how many children are coming to school, how many parents will opt for remote learning, as well as the teachers and staff that are returning to work in the fall. So those are three big factors that will play into determining which one of these models, based on the capacity, will be best suited for the school community. And I just want to share that our superintendents and our Manhattan BCO staff have been incredibly supportive and will continue to do that. We have structured our superintendencies and BCO to meet weekly with principals to ensure that we know how to support them in a very timely manner.
Holy moly. So a follow-up to that point that, hang on one second, to the point that you just made, Marisol, many schools have limited outdoor spaces or have spaces that open to the public after school hours. Does the DOE have plans to assist schools in closing streets in front of buildings at crowded drop-off pickup times, closing school playgrounds to the public after school lets out, or opening alternative outdoor spaces for school use in parks, community gardens, or through the City Parks Department Play Streets application process?
So, I mean, I'll answer and then I'll defer to Deputy Chancellor Austin, but I know that DOE is working closely with all of our sisters, whether it's Department of Health, Parks and Recreation, to ensure that we are well equipped and prepared to open schools, maximize space while adhering to safety protocols and any other guidance that is coming from the Department of Health. And so with that said, Deputy Chancellor, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, obviously, this is a safety and health imperative, right? That this is the safety and health of our students is what has to drive all of our planning. So we're looking at, and we will be giving guidance, and this is something that principals are going to be working through, is guidance on egress and entry into the building, staggered entry times, and coordinating all of that. That's going to be a part of the planning process that principals are going to do. I just will say, obviously, we're being super careful about public convenings and having large groups of people because we're in a public health crisis. And so certainly that's top of mind. And the reason that we're coming back to schools and where we're having in-person instruction is because we know that it makes a difference. And we know that in-person learning is critical to making sure that students are on target with meeting academic outcomes and metrics. And so we're committed to in-person learning, but the fundamental has to be the health and safety of our students. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that there are protocols in place to limit sort of the number of people who are gathering. And that involves a lot of control around entry, exit, and public spaces and how we're using them.
You know, I just want to give a shout out to the D3 Green Schools group that is working with, collaborating with a variety of other groups to help incorporate outdoor space. So I just want to give them a shout out and let you know that they're interested in collaborating with you. Next question, how will remote learning be different in the fall? For example, will there be requirements for live instruction during distance learning? Not sure I understand the second part of that, but will there be a difference in remote learning in the fall?
There's certainly going to be a difference. There are a lot of lessons learned from our remote learning experience in the spring, and one of them is that we need more synchronous instruction. And so obviously there are conversations happening now that are going to determine what exactly that looks like, and obviously there are labor considerations there, and those conversations are happening. We have synchronous instruction now during summer remote learning, which I think there will also be a lot of lessons learned through that. But that's an ongoing conversation, and we should have more within the next, upcoming weeks. Marisol, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I think that we have learned tremendous amount about what works best for children. I mean, in some cases and in some grade levels, we have seen that remote learning has worked better for some of our children. And so what has been helpful for us educators is the partnership and communication with families, right? And so something that I encourage is to continue to communicate with principals and with teachers what is working for your child. So blended learning gives us that opportunity. Blended learning gives us the opportunity to maximize and leverage the practices that have proven to be effective so far that we can then implement and maximize in the fall.
Okay, and thank you very much. And I'm half reading the chat. We're trying to get through as many questions as possible. I'm actually going to group the next 3 questions together because they're of a similar nature. So if you need me to repeat any of this, feel free. When will admission policies be announced? How is the decision being made? Are you still considering parent input? Based on how differently schools may incorporate the reopen plans, how do you ensure best standards and practices so that school inequities are not exacerbated? And there has been no discussion of how schools in general and teachers in particular will assess academic levels when schools reopen. And more importantly, how does the blended learning model accommodate then resetting academic standards? It's a lot.
So I think this is a great time to bring in my colleague, Ms. Chada, if you want to chime in on some of the admissions questions.
Hi, thanks, Adrienne. Yeah, sure. So in terms of the admissions decision, we are still definitely considering parent input. I personally am in the inbox that gets the comments from our website and emails that come in and get to see those every day. And we're still reviewing those. As many of you may know, we've done several town halls and stakeholder meetings and meetings with elected officials and their constituents on this issue. So we've heard a lot of feedback there as well, and are really in the process of understanding what we've heard, reflecting on it, kind of channeling those perspectives into policy. And we are also still talking to principals and school staff who are in the midst of also focusing on how we're going to get school started in the fall. So really, to be quite honest, all of the DOE's attention has been focused on the reopening plan. So we're still kind of negotiating policy and collecting feedback with the Chancellor's office and the mayor and City Hall. So we're bringing that all together. We're thinking about a best policy that's fair to as many students as possible. And it's possible that there may not be a decision until closer to the fall, but we'll definitely have a decision in advance of the admissions process starting next year. I think those were the admissions questions. And then there were a couple of questions about just curriculum or assessing student performance. Is that right?
Yeah. I think Marisol would be best suited to talk a little bit about
Absolutely. I think something that became very obvious for us educators here in Manhattan through this pandemic, and the fact that the realities of so many of our children was impacted in such horrific ways in some places. And the experience of losing family members or being ill. And so trauma-informed pedagogy is a reality for us in Manhattan. And what has been clear to us is that we have to all become articulate and well-informed when it comes to trauma-informed pedagogy, as well as blended learning, remote learning, synchronous and asynchronous teaching. And so those are the trainings that we have during the summer and will continue to have during the fall to ensure that we know how to transition our children into reopening of school, whether that is live teaching, whether that is remote learning. Is going to be critical that we integrate the social emotional learning and trauma-informed care into core academic instruction. The other area that we're looking closely is tasks, right? So if we're talking about children coming to school twice a week, 3 times a week, and then learning remotely, we need to, and we are in the process of looking at our task through the lens of standards-based, right? Our next generation learning standards. How are these tasks culturally responsive and aligned to state standards? So there is a lot of work that is happening, and there's a lot of work in learning for us. And what is really important is that we've learned so much, and there's such an opportunity to ensure that these tasks are rigorous academically as well as culturally responsive to our children and their cultures and identity.
Thank you. And there's a lot of chat in the chat about this. People are very concerned. So we appreciate your continuing to be transparent and interactive with the parents in the district as you continue to make your decisions. Sorry. Oh, one question keeps coming up that will the deck be available to parents? And I think some people tried to find it on the DOE website and couldn't. So I'm going to assume it's on the DOE website, and when people get my follow-up email tomorrow or the next day, we will include a link so you can have the slideshow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Council member.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, feel free to share that. We shared it yesterday with our principals, our parent coordinators have this deck. Our parent coordinators especially, because almost every one of our schools has a parent coordinator on staff, and their role is really, has always been to support families, but particularly now, we have a lot of asks of our parent coordinators for this summer because parent engagement is going to be really important. So they have the deck, and they can also share the deck, and parents who are here can feel free to reach out to their parent coordinator to walk them through what's happening and get sort of a status update from parent coordinators about how the school is assessing and processing this information as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to add that our superintendents across Manhattan, our 6 community superintendents, will be sharing the deck at their CEC meetings. And so, just continue to encourage and invite our families to attend those. And we have staff at the Manhattan Borough Citywide Office who can actually unpack the models with families at these meetings. So, I can definitely make that commitment because I know that your amazing superintendent is already planning on doing that.
All right. And sorry, these are in no particular order. We're just culling out the ones that get asked over and over again and trying to make sure we hit on every area. And I appreciate your being here, even if you don't always have the answer. I really appreciate your being here. Given that the hybrid model will be every other or every third day, is there now an expectation you are going to extend the school year to make up for lost time? If not, does this mean you will be revising standards, and what will that mean for our children's education?
Yes, so just to sort of clarify the expectations of what the scheduling is going to look like, students who are not participating in in-person instruction for, let's say you're on Monday and Tuesday, but you're off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there's going to be remote instruction on those days. So it's not that there's actually going to be a loss of 3 days of instruction, it's that it's going to be different, it's going to be blended, so that part of the week is in person, part of the week is remote. So that's the blended model. And so our expectation is that we are going to be able to keep up with the state standards and sort of pace learning in that way. Marisol, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, it's what I shared earlier, that we are working with our teachers and our principals to ensure that the work that is happening at the school and the work that is happening remotely are deeply connected and aligned to state standards, as well as making sure that the culturally responsive and engage includes some social emotional learning.
And Marisol, if it's okay, I just wanted to chime in about that.
Christine.
I just wanted to say hello to everybody. Thank you so much, Councilwoman Rosenthal, for putting this together, and Deputy Chancellor Austin and Executive Superintendent Rosales. It's nice to see you, Nadia, as well. So one of the things that we've been really focusing on with principals is really looking at professional development. Typically, we come together, you know, once a month, and we also have different cohorts and learning partner groups within our principals meetings that they meet together to share best practices, and that structure is still going on in remote learning. And we have been working together to really lift up what we see as possible challenges as it comes to instruction. So just an example, one of the things we've been so focusing on this year is peer and self-assessment, formative assessment practices, which are going to look different, right, next year, because we want to be very cognizant about students and social distancing. So we're already having those conversations around what we need to have in place for our principals and our teachers as we move forward and you know, embrace this challenge cohesively and collectively together. So I just wanted to say that we're really looking at PD very differently.
Christine, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you. Couple of questions having to do with families. Will you try to group siblings on the same day? What about families that have children in different schools, sometimes in different boroughs? Is there an option to coordinate so that need for childcare and working from home is minimized?
Yes, we are asking principals to have siblings programmed on the same day within the school, and we're working on a more guidance and a policy around siblings. It's more global than that.
Okay. Will any accommodations be made for younger kids for whom remote learning was quite difficult? I'm worried that any days off for my child will essentially be lost days, and he's already behind given how difficult remote learning was for kids. He's just learning how to read and write.
Yes, so the program models that we showed earlier are the program models that schools are going to select from. And obviously this is it's a challenging problem, trying to accommodate social distancing. We know that, you know, it's the younger children are benefited from being in schools, but all of our kids are benefited from being in a school environment, not just for the learning, but for the social aspect of learning from one another and doing group work. And, you know, we could go on and on about the benefits of like being in person, but in everyone together, but that's just not possible. And so these models take into account sort of where we are with the pandemic. And certainly there's going to be, you know, we're asking principals to select from the models that are provided. There will be, you know, very few exceptions, hopefully, but there is an exception process for principals that are unable to work with the program models, and it's going to be an exception process. So it's going to have to be, you know, based on something very tangible that principals are not able to use the models because of the unique challenges of their school environment. But there is an exception process for principals.
And I'm seeing here lots of questions about sort of what if something changes with COVID, or what if the CDC issues revised and more lenient guidelines for school reopening in the future? Will the mayor's reopening plan be revised to reflect new guidelines?
Great question. We are certainly in a dynamic environment. These program models are what we are planning to do in the fall. Certainly, you know, we've been in a dynamic environment. If you look at what we did in the spring, it looks different than what we're doing in the summer, and what we're doing in the fall looks different than what we're doing now. And so certainly as the guidance changes, we're going to be amenable and nimble and flexible around changes, because we want to serve students in the best way that we can. That said, the plan for fall is the plan that was announced yesterday. And so that's where we are. And, you know, I totally understand the desire and the inclination to think 10 steps ahead. Certainly as parents, that's how we live, we have to. But in this circumstance, we're just trying to think, you know, a couple steps ahead, which is fall. So that's where we are.
Okay, this question, I'm not sure it, but I'm follow-up question, will the same teacher be teaching all different groups? Will the teacher be teaching group A, B, and C? If so, how does that mitigate spread and exposure?
I'm going to let Marisol, we've got the Executive Superintendent Rosales and Superintendent Laughlin here. I'm going to let them answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also depends, right? We don't know yet the percentage or which teachers will be coming back in the fall. We do know that some of our teachers are super well versed when it comes to remote learning. And so the programming will definitely be driven by safety protocols, not just for children, but also for adults, as well as building from the strengths of the teacher as to who is teaching synchronous, asynchronous, who is teaching remotely, who is teaching live. But I just want to reinforce something that's been shared tonight, that the safety of children, staff, and adults is the priority for this. And Christine, I don't know if there's anything you want to share that's specific to the district.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the only thing that I would add would be that we are, you know, we're still working together to try to find like the best practices as it relates to the conditions that are in place around pedagogy, just as we want to ensure the capacity in terms of, you know, the CDC guidelines. We want to also make sure that there's coherence, right? That there's coherence for a child who knows, and I know that that's more difficult in the early grades. So one of the things that we're thinking about doing is, you know, really coming together and doing a best practice. You know, what is it that we need for our students to be successful in this remote blended learning process? So there'll be more to come on that. And that's kind of what I mean by the professional developments that we're working on to really maximize the capacity of the programming models as it's aligned to our instructional focus.
You know, it's 7:57, and if I could indulge your time just for 2 more questions. This has been amazing. You're trying to do the impossible to answer a lot of questions that we don't have answers for yet. But can I keep you 5 minutes after class? Okay. Will any of these models be different for specialized programs, e.g., for example, District G&T? If so, how?
Yeah, I'll give like a global central answer, and then I'm going to turn it over, which is that these program models we're expecting principals to follow these program models and adopt these in consultation with their SLTs and making sure that they're consistent with the needs of their school community. And there is an exception process. If there is an exceptional circumstance, certainly principals will be able to reach out to their superintendent. Here's Superintendent Laughlin. To make a pitch for something, but there has to be a legitimate reason, because the program models that we've given are really with the idea of making sure there's consistency across our districts and consistency and equity for all of our students. So with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the models, meaning how many days a child attends school and then how many days the child is home is one thing, right? And then the other is a curriculum or the program. And while our teachers and principals will continue to ensure that they adhere, right, to that curricula and that program, that is the work. And what we hear Superintendent Laughlin reinforce is the professional development of teachers, right? To ensure that the program that they teach, that they treat that with fidelity so that there's nothing lost.
There are lots of questions. Why are we not seeing an option about full-time education in an in-person school setting? What are requirements that are needed to get there? We're offering the option to full-time remote learning. Why not an option for full-time in-class learning? What is the time frame to get there if the numbers continue to remain low as they are now?
Yes, so the obstacle to allowing everyone to come back is the pandemic. We are still under a state executive order that is requiring and mandating social distancing. And so that is the challenge that we were up against, is how do we implement social distancing in New York City classrooms, which are our buildings. Our city is not built for social distancing, right? New York City is built, it's a very densely populated city. We accommodate lots and lots of kids in our schools. A lot of our school buildings are over capacity. And so that's the challenge. And that is the reason why we can't have everyone come back. We are still in the midst of the throes of the pandemic. We're seeing surges across the country. And we are mindful of that. And we are doing this, in that context and planning in that context, and want to be as safe as possible, because what we don't want to see is what we saw in March. And so that is what this planning process protects against. What is at the core of that is the health and safety of our students and our staff. And we are mindful of what's happening across the country. And so this is the planning for fall as of now. But we certainly aren't going to have any plan in place for the fall that would endanger the safety of our kids.
And a quick follow-up to that. What is the policy for each school about informing the community if someone in the community tests positive? And what if someone in a student's or parent's family tests positive? And will that in-person class have to isolate?
Yes, so our notification process is going to make sure that we provide health information to our families and our school community as quickly as possible. Letters are going to be sent home to families when a student or staff member tests positive for COVID-19. I can tell you that the expectation is that every school is going to have an isolation room. And the purpose of that isolation room is if a child is exhibiting symptoms or someone is exhibiting symptoms, that there's a place, an isolation room, where that child will be sort of overseen and observed by a nurse, and then, picked up by a parent and until we have further information. So there's a process. We're still building out the protocols of how all of this is going to work. And some of this is going to be school dependent because it's going to depend on the staffing that's at the school, but there will be an isolation room in every school, and there will be notification to families immediately.
There are, it feels like 1,000 questions on here. And we are going to do our best to, if it's all right with you, Deputy Chancellor, we'd like to share this list of questions. Maybe we'll try to organize them a little bit. And if it's possible for you to, you know, answer some of the questions that were not asked tonight, and then we'll include that in our e-blast that we get out. I'm seeing maybe not tomorrow, but hopefully very soon.
Absolutely.
That'd be all right?
That would be great. It would be helpful, because what we would like to do and what we are in the process of doing is building out a Q&A. Just that for all, and like an FAQ for all of our families, because, you know, we've had over 500 folks here tonight. I have a colleague who is in Queens, and there are over 300 people there. It was like a district planning, small, you know, CEC meeting, and everyone has questions on school reopening. So we know that families have lots of questions. Please send them to me. We will incorporate them into the FAQ. And it looks like Superintendent Laughlin has maybe something to say on that front.
Oh, that would be great. No? Any last words from anyone before I sign us off?
I will just say thank you before I know everyone wants to say a few parting words. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I love to hear from our families and the questions. They help me orient to, you know, what people are thinking and what we need to solve for. So I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to all of our families, and everyone have a great night.
Awesome. I would like to say that in my 27 years with the Department of Education as a mother, as a Latina woman of color, and in my current role as the executive superintendent, I couldn't be prouder of our collective effort. We built a new system when other districts across the country did not. We put electronic devices in the hands of children and families who did not have them. We served over 100,000 meals every day during this pandemic. And so I am so proud of our collective effort. And as I think about the planning and the work that we need to do ahead for the fall, I just want us to continue to collaborate, communicate, because it will require a collective effort and collective leadership. I am so happy that I was invited to attend tonight. I can't wait to take a look, to give these questions a closer look, because they will definitely inform the work that we will continue to do in Manhattan. I am so proud of our Superintendent Laughlin and the other 6 superintendents. I am so proud of our BCO. And just most importantly, I'm just so proud of us New Yorkers for figuring this thing out together. So thank you so very much for having me tonight.
Terrific. Christine, you might have missed my introduction of you. I was saying that so glad you're here because everyone recognizes you. It's unbelievable. You've only been here for a year. It feels like you know the district so well. So we really appreciate your being here tonight.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much for saying that. I actually did hear what you said. I was in the audience part and not on the panel. So,
yeah.
So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity tonight. You know, as Executive Rosales said in the beginning, that this was my first year, and it certainly was a challenging year. And I just want everyone to know that I am committed to this district, and I see a way forward by all of us working together. I think one of the things that this pandemic has taught me is that there is power in unity and working together and showing up on behalf of our children. And you know, we're here. We'll do what we can. It is definitely going to be challenging, and you know, there are going to be issues along the way. And my hope is that we can continue to support one another, be kind to each other, and really work on behalf of our children for their safety, for instructional coherence, and for all of our students. Because one of the things that we have learned is that the inequities during COVID-19 have really have been very exacerbated, and there's so much work that we're going to need to do when we go back in September. And I look forward to the challenge. So thank you, everybody, so much.
Thank you, Christine. So my great thanks to Deputy Chancellor Austin, Manhattan Executive Superintendent Rosales, Senior Director Shada, and District 3 Superintendent Laughlin for joining us tonight. I appreciate the fact that there are not a ton of answers yet, but it is clear that you are being so thoughtful in trying to balance the combination of needs all during a time of a very contagious pandemic that can be lethal. And you're clearly working hard to, you know, put out the best for our students. I really appreciate that. I also want to thank my staff for their hard work pulling this event together. Marisa Mock, Julian Della Porta, and Sarah Crean. If you haven't already, please sign up to get my e-blast from my office at helenrosenthal.com. And one quick reminder, it's just critical, and we're seeing the impact of this now. Please, please fill out your census form. If you've already filled out yours, contact 5 friends and make sure they have filled out theirs. The impact of not filling out the census is that New York City is underrepresented in Congress, and we receive less federal aid for our schools, hospitals, and other critical services. All of that funding is based on a formula which is driven by our census counts. So please, it's so important, and we're seeing the effect of people not having filled out their census in the past. Our district right now is at about 48% of the district has filled out the census form. 10 years ago, we were at about 60%. So I really urge everyone to see the importance of that and encourage everyone to fill out their census forms. So stay safe and well, and thank you everyone for joining us. I do want to double down on the notion of trying to remember to be kind to one another during this very difficult time. Thank you.